Nordic Asset, my new book, is coming out when Jupiter is in Sagittarius. Unlike the project by Kubrick, Stanley Kubrick was going to produce the movie, the best movie, but that was never made, on Napoleon, and he had studied Napoleon backwards, had photographed everything, prepared, planned, pre-produced, but the film was never made. I went around it the other way around. I first filmed about 100 clips over the last 2 years, which discusses the whole astrology until 2080, let's say 4 generations out. And we've discussed the extraterrestrial transfer of technology, the phenomenon, and we've touched on all subjects from Krishnamurti to Lessing. We had even a special project, the Red Man project with Dr. King. And so what is the book Nordic Asset about? It's that we will show the photography of the videos in a special size format book, together with my handwritten narrative, which was the script of all of the clips that you have seen. And that's the project I'm discussing at the moment. In a very serendipitous astrology, the astrology, even though we're going through the end cycle, has very good phases in the middle. Jupiter in Sagittarius cannot get better for discussing far-sighted projects. And Saturn in Capricorn takes its time. Big projects can take many, many years that I've worked on this, and brick by brick, clip by clip, one puts the work together, and that's Saturn in Capricorn. I was born with Saturn in Capricorn, now it's the second return. Out of that signature, good things can come in big projects worldwide, and I always try to show you the chance, the optimistic window of time where things can get accomplished. As filmmakers, documentary film producers and movie makers, most of us have studied Stanley Kubrick's gigantic work. Maybe you remember in his movie Shining, he's said to have given some clues with the little boy Danny wearing the Apollo 11 shirt. And he was a master of the esoteric world, and today we're going to talk about the project by Kubrick, Napoleon. And in his project Napoleon, he had left out the Little Red Man. We had talked about the Little Red Man, but Kubrick knew about the Little Red Man. He was researching all these things at the very same time as he was working on 2001 Space Odyssey in the late 1960s. And you know, who wants to hear that Stanley Kubrick actually filmed the Apollo mission for the greatest nation on Earth? But the question then remained about the reputation of this greatest nation and also the image. And Buzz Aldrin really settled the matter by saying, when we were thinking about doing it, we were planning, testing, experimenting, we were doing a lot of things, but we were not maybe understanding space. And inherently between the lines, Buzz Aldrin simply said to that little 8-year-old girl, we didn't do it. Okay, Napoleon. This is a gigantic project that Kubrick had been working on for possibly decades. By 1969, he had written the script. He himself wrote the script. This book is a facsimile version of the 10 books that consisted the entire research and all the photography. This book holds, with a little magnetic card, access to an online library of Kubrick's 17,000 photos. He had photographed Napoleon and the sites all over Europe, studied it, researched it with a British university professor assisting him. So this is definitely a British view of Napoleon. And he had photographed, researched, documented every single situation. This book has 1,100 pages, historic photography of that time that he was researching, as well as later then he prepared his own photography on the ground, and he himself went to go photograph every situation that would become a scene in his film. And so if you just flip through these outside photography pictures, interior design pictures, you get a feeling how the story will move. Unfortunately, the studios turned him down, and he did not even have the red man in the story. He may have put it on screen later, we just don't know. Then, about 400 pages of pictures later, for instance, we see he studied how the uniforms have to look. He researched this to the millimeter. Nothing was left to imagination. And eventually starts his own script. Napoleon, a screenplay by Stanley Kubrick. Copyright date was September 29, 1969. So this is right after Space Odyssey came out. The typeface is a little larger, so you can read it well, but it would amount to about 2.5 hours film. He begins in Corsica at night, and here we see the little brother looking at what's going on, and we meet the little boy Napoleon. We learn a little bit that he was educated in esoteric, let's say spiritual things that he had a great deal of interest in. He probably knew one can predict the future, and this is where the Little Red Man is missing, because it's a historic novel that just follows precisely what's going on. For instance, he takes a moment time to go into the discussion between Napoleon and Alexander. Here we have now skipped 40 years of his life, and we see him, Alexander, the young Tsar, in Moscow in discussions with his generals, and the generals advise Napoleon pretty much to let him sit it out and just wait until the winter will take care of business. At that point, the Little Red Man had left Napoleon. He had told him, whatever you do, don't invade Russia, and if you do, you'll never see me again, and you will be finished. So you know the rest of the history. The screenplay ends in Helena, St. Helena, at the end. And then we got a total of 400 more pages of notes, annotations, and historical photography. I mean, in short, and then it's translated in German, French, and Spanish, no less. 1100 pages, a giant project, which I'm using because I'm interested in both the history, Europe, the shaping of this continent, and Kubrick's esoteric work. Which leads me back to our work, Nordic Asset, where we go about it the other way around. We're filming the video clips, and then we'll excerpt the best photography, and I will then give my handwritten footnotes of my book Nordic Asset to the side of the photography. So this then becomes, let's say, an art book with the astrological futuristic commentary into 2020, 25, 2050, 2080. Plus the discussion we had about extraterrestrial technology transfer, and also we will go into Kubrick precisely and into Krishnamurti, the two big Ks, Krishnamurti and Kubrick. To understand the esoteric and the entire work of Kubrick, we need to know Jay Weidner's work, research. He's the foremost expert on Stanley Kubrick's esoteric side of work, the way he can deliver messages in a large spectrum of dimensions, of layers of reality. It's always multi-layered, and so is his work Space Odyssey. And the same would have been the case with Napoleon, which starts at his birth in Corsica with the little teddy bear, and it ends in Rome with his mother surviving him, looking at the little teddy bear. Really, the movie ends at the moment when Napoleon passes away in St. Helena, talking to his adjutant about afterlife. And then the nameless grave. They were arguing, should it be Napoleon Bonaparte, which the British wanted, or should, as the French wanted, it just say Napoleon, period. The result was an empty grave. I mean, no name on the grave. Nameless grave. This was not Kubrick's idea, this is actually the reality. This is the chest into which Stanley Kubrick had organized his entire research and cross-reference system. He could look up any person on any given date during this Napoleon story and immediately see which kind of sequence or scene he was trying to build. And it's based on all of this research that this entire book was created. Of course, we have in addition the script, the actual screenplay. This is just to show how intensely, meticulously organized Kubrick was going about his preparations. Hundreds of pages of all of those cards reanalyzed. It speaks for itself. So, going back one more time from Putin in Moscow to Napoleon's Moscow moment. Here we're inside the discussion between General Kutuzov, he's the commander-in-chief, and the young Tsar Alexander. And the general is just explaining to him that Napoleon basically is in a very weak position and he's seeing the first signs of weaknesses, and Alexander just tells him, okay, proceed, give me this briefing now. And he tells him, if I can presume to go into the emperor's mind, into Napoleon's head, I believe that he has based his entire campaign strategy on obtaining a peace treaty after the fall of Moscow. When Vienna fell, there was a peace treaty. When Berlin fell, another treaty. That has always been the rules of his game. But what is he to do now if no treaty is forthcoming? He knows that beyond Moscow there is nothing, and that if he withdraws, there remains only a fall back into emptiness. And so Alexander is listening to this stuff, and he asks the general, what do you think Napoleon will do? And then he explains it to him, and you know the rest of the story. That's the key moment. So to bring this back, Kubrick, Napoleon, Europe, 200 years of history, why would an astrologer that looks into the future study history? And Kubrick, okay, I'm talking here about space-time and events and timelines. During the last 100 clips we've explained astrology, ancient futures, the extraterrestrials. And the Nordic say, and we know, reality is held together by events. Okay, and as an astrologer I can then measure this, 2020, Pluto, Saturn, 750 years alignment. So go back to Moscow, where Alexander waited out Napoleon. We now have Putin, who, as I predicted, would stay true to his path and purpose. And we have to understand, all of us, we humans, we are part of these events that are now unfolding. And this reality we're in is held together by these events. And our actions define the future.